The recent joint airstrikes by the United States and the United Kingdom on Houthi rebel positions in Yemen mark a significant escalation in the ongoing conflict. The Houthi movement, primarily composed of Yemen's Zaidi Shia Muslim minority, has been in conflict with Yemen's internationally recognized government for years. The situation has drawn in regional and global powers, creating a complex web of alliances and enmities. These airstrikes come in response to the Houthis' increased missile and drone attacks on neighboring Saudi Arabia, a key ally of both the US and the UK. The strategic calculus behind these strikes is to weaken the Houthis' military capabilities and deter future attacks against coalition forces and their interests in the region. The operation also signals a robust commitment from Western powers to their Middle Eastern allies, especially in the context of global geopolitical shifts. The conflict in Yemen has often been described as a proxy war between Saudi Arabia and Iran, with the latter alleged to be supporting the Houthi rebels. This dimension adds layers of international intrigue and complexity, influencing the decisions and actions taken by global powers involved in the region. The recent airstrikes are thus a focal point, not only of military action, but also of diplomatic tensions and alignments. In the early hours of a quiet morning, precision-guided munitions were launched targeting key Houthi installations. These included missile storage facilities, drone assembly areas, and command and control centers. The strikes were designed to maximize damage to military infrastructure while minimizing civilian casualties, a point emphasized in official statements from both the US and UK defense departments. The immediate aftermath of the airstrikes saw a significant disruption in Houthi military operations. Reports from the ground indicated a halt in drone activities, which have been a constant threat to Saudi airspace. The destruction of sophisticated weaponry has temporarily reduced the threat level, providing a strategic breathing space for coalition forces. However, the strikes were not without controversy. Local reports emerged of casualties among civilians, including some displaced by previous conflicts. These reports have sparked debates about the accuracy and morality of using such powerful military tools in populated areas. The challenge of distinguishing between militant and civilian targets in Yemen's dense urban environments continues to complicate the military objectives. The primary objective of the airstrikes was to degrade the operational capabilities of the Houthi forces. By focusing on missile depots and drone facilities, the Allies aimed to cut off the supply chain that enables the Houthis to launch attacks at a distance. This strategic move is intended to prevent further escalations and protect civilian populations in Saudi Arabia and Yemen from indiscriminate attacks. Another key objective was to send a clear message to Iran, which is widely believed to be supporting the Houthis. By targeting sophisticated weaponry and infrastructure, the US and UK are signaling their unwillingness to tolerate Iranian influence extending into the Arabian Peninsula. This is part of a broader strategy to contain Iranian influence in the Middle East, aligning with the interests of their regional allies. The choice of targets also reflects a nuanced understanding of the battlefield. The Allies have likely used advanced intelligence, possibly gathered from reconnaissance satellites and local informants, to identify points of maximum impact. This approach demonstrates a shift towards more intelligence-driven, precision warfare aimed at achieving specific political and military outcomes with minimal collateral damage. The humanitarian toll of the ongoing conflict in Yemen is devastating. The recent airstrikes, while targeted at military assets, have unfortunately also led to civilian casualties. Local health facilities reported several injured and fatalities, exacerbating the already dire humanitarian situation in the country. The complexity of urban warfare, where combatants and civilians are closely intermingled, makes civilian casualties almost inevitable. These events have prompted a fresh wave of displacement, with families fleeing the targeted areas in search of safety. Yemen, already reeling under one of the worst humanitarian crises in the world, faces further strain on its resources. Displaced populations struggle with access to essential services, such as clean water, healthcare, and shelter. The airstrikes have thus added layers of suffering to an already vulnerable populace. International humanitarian organizations have been quick to respond, but their efforts are hampered by the security situation and logistical challenges. The destruction of infrastructure, including roads and bridges, in previous combats has made it difficult to provide timely aid. Humanitarian agencies continue to call for ceasefires and peace talks, emphasizing that the ultimate solution to Yemen's woes is political, not military. The international community has reacted to the airstrikes with a mix of support, condemnation, and calls for restraint. Allies of the US and the UK, particularly those in the European Union, have expressed cautious support for the actions taken, emphasizing the need for all parties to return to the negotiating table. On the other hand, countries like Russia and China have criticized the strikes, calling them an escalation of the conflict that undermines peace efforts. The United Nations has been particularly vocal, with the Secretary General urging all parties to engage in dialogue and to respect international humanitarian law. The UN's Special Envoy to Yemen has called for an immediate ceasefire, highlighting that military solutions cannot achieve lasting peace or stability. These statements reflect a broad consensus that while military actions might be necessary, they are not sufficient on their own. Non-governmental organizations, especially those focused on human rights and humanitarian aid, have been critical of the airstrikes. They argue that such actions exacerbate the suffering of Yemen's civilian population and complicate the delivery of humanitarian aid. These groups have been active in documenting the aftermath of the strikes and in providing relief to the affected populations, all while advocating for a more comprehensive political solution to the conflict. The economic impact of the conflict in Yemen extends beyond the immediate damage caused by military operations. The ongoing war has devastated Yemen's infrastructure, hindered development, and disrupted normal economic activities, plunging the country into severe poverty. The airstrikes, while targeted at military assets, also affect economic stability by increasing insecurity and deterring investment. The cost of military engagement for the US and the UK is substantial and comes at a time when both nations are dealing with domestic economic pressures. The financial burden of overseas military operations can be contentious, particularly when the benefits are not immediately apparent. This aspect often fuels debate within these countries about the role and extent of foreign military interventions. Moreover, the conflict disrupts regional trade routes and impacts the global economy, particularly the oil markets, given Yemen's strategic position by the Red Sea. Ensuring the security of maritime routes is a significant concern for many nations, which partly justifies the involvement of Western powers in the region. However, the long-term economic effects of such engagements are complex and can contribute to global economic instability. The airstrikes have significant implications for regional politics and stability. By taking decisive action against the Houthi rebels, the US and the UK reinforce their alliances with Gulf countries, particularly Saudi Arabia. This support is crucial for maintaining the balance of power in the Middle East, where the US and its allies seek to counter Iranian influence and maintain stability in key strategic zones. However, these actions also risk further polarizing the region. Iran may perceive the strikes as a direct threat to its interests and could respond by increasing its support to the Houthis or by other means within the broader Middle East. Such tit-for-tat escalations can lead to a cycle of retaliation, undermining efforts to stabilize the region and potentially leading to a broader conflict. Internally, the dynamics within Yemen are also affected. The show of force by Western powers could either weaken the Houthi resolve or galvanize them to seek more substantial support from Iran and other allies. This could further complicate the efforts to bring about a peaceful resolution to the conflict, as each party may dig in, relying more on military solutions rather than diplomatic negotiations. The role of the media in shaping public perception of the airstrikes cannot be underestimated. Coverage in Western media has generally supported the narrative of a justified response to Houthi aggressions, emphasizing the precision and strategic necessity of the airstrikes. This portrayal helps garner public support for the military actions and paints them as necessary for regional stability and security. Conversely, media outlets in other parts of the world, particularly in countries sympathetic to the Houthi cause or critical of Western foreign policy, portray the strikes in a negative light. They focus on the humanitarian consequences and the perpetuation of conflict, which can influence public opinion against the US and UK. The global digital landscape means these differing narratives compete for legitimacy and influence on the international stage. Social media also plays a crucial role, with real-time updates, citizen journalism, and viral posts shaping narratives in unprecedented ways. The immediacy and emotional impact of images and stories from the ground can sway public opinion and influence policy decisions. Governments and non-state actors alike must navigate this complex media environment, where control over the narrative can be just as important as control over the ground. Experts in military strategy and international relations have been closely analyzing the airstrikes. Many agree that while the strikes may achieve short-term military objectives, their long-term effectiveness is uncertain without a broader political strategy. They caution that military actions alone are insufficient to bring peace and that sustained diplomatic efforts are essential. Analysts also highlight the potential for these airstrikes to alter the dynamics of international alliances and power structures in the Middle East. The involvement of major powers like the US and the UK not only affects their relations with Middle Eastern countries, but also impacts their global standing and relations with other superpowers, such as China and Russia, who have their own interests in the region. Moreover, humanitarian experts warn that the escalation of military activities could worsen the humanitarian crisis in Yemen. They advocate for an integrated approach that includes not only diplomatic and military strategies, but also robust humanitarian interventions. The goal is to ensure that while military objectives may be pursued, they should not overshadow the urgent humanitarian needs of the Yemeni population. The recent airstrikes by the US and the UK on Houthi positions in Yemen represent a critical moment in the conflict. While they may have achieved their immediate military objectives, the long-term consequences for regional stability, international relations, and the humanitarian situation in Yemen remain uncertain. The global community continues to grapple with the complex interplay of military actions and diplomatic efforts needed to resolve the conflict. Future scenarios could range from a de-escalation of hostilities if all parties return to negotiation, to an intensification of the conflict if retaliations continue. The international community's role in fostering dialogue and supporting a sustainable political solution is more crucial than ever. Continued focus on humanitarian aid and conflict resolution strategies will be vital in shaping the future of Yemen and its people. Ultimately, the path to peace in Yemen requires a multifaceted approach that balances strategic interests with humanitarian priorities. The international community, along with regional players, must work together to forge a durable peace that not only ends the conflict, but also addresses the underlying issues that fuel it. The eyes of the world remain on Yemen, hopeful for a resolution that brings stability and prosperity to its beleaguered people.